You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you so much for joining me here today on this Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday. We're going to be covering how to rebuild your gut using our Sensitive Gut Guide. This is one of the most popular protocols that we use in my practice, whether it be in Boston or anywhere essentially in the world. Over Skype, we use that quite a bit nowadays. And what I wanted to do, as always, is try to bring you exactly what I see work in my practice so that you can implement it in your own life, your family's life, or just pass it on. Pass the information on, whether it's your practice, if you're a health practitioner or a personal trainer, doctor, acupuncturist, chiropractor, RD, you name it. We love working with all those different types of health practitioners. Looking forward in the future, of course, to be able to work with you more so that we can all kind of join together, that we can share what's working and really, pass it on for the benefit of our patients, our wellness clients, and of course, the greater community. And that's the whole thing. Is the whole point to all of this is to be able to continue to learn, never stop learning. So a lot of times, I'll speak with people, whether it's a health practitioner at a seminar or convention, and they're already locked up. They already feel like they know it all, that, that's it. They've mastered whatever there is to master. But what I've seen is this, is every time I get exposed to, a practitioner who's maybe been doing it for 10 years, 20 years, whatever it might be, is there's always some facet to their practice or their knowledge base that I can learn from. I can't even think of an example where I haven't been able to learn from someone who's really put in their 10,000 hours. They've done 10,000 hours worth of appointments. And that's because they've worked with clients from maybe a different walk of life, or they've kind of put things in a different perspective. So, that's the thing, is always be the ongoing student. It's so important. I really believe that. And then at the same time, every time you go to teach, so whether you're a mom or a dad or someone who's a leader in your community, or even your office, like maybe you're the go-to person in your office for health-based advice, every time I see someone teach another person, it deepens their level of knowledge as well. So never be afraid to just say, oh, well, I'm not the expert, so I can't talk on it. Yes, you can. Because right now, you're probably the expert to someone else. Meaning there's someone else right now who doesn't even know about low glycemic foods, right? Low sugar foods. Or they don't know about inflammation. They've never heard about that before. Or they didn't know that there was an alternative to things like antibiotics. That if you get sick, you don't always need to reach for that antibiotic. That you could actually start doing things like our adult or children's-based immune protocol. And I don't even know if there's a single vitamin formulated by Equilibrium Nutrition in that. It's just all great products that we try to really promote. That's what it's all about, promoting the best of the best. And that's what I want to go over here today. What we're talking about is a nutrition plan that I formulated really over, let's say, how long I've been studying nutrition, about 20 years. And so this is 20 years that started out originally for body transformation. Okay, that was my first goal as a 18, 19-year-old kid in college saying, okay, you've hired me to help you as a personal trainer and nutritionist to transform your body. That's what I'm going to do. That was my only focus. That's why people hired me and said, okay, great. Well, that's my job. I need to be the best I can at my job. And then after that, it was also learning about anti-inflammatory, and that helped me. And then, of course, it helped a lot of other people as well, especially those with autoimmune-based issues. And then it grew from there, right? It got into the lower glycemic. We're going to be talking about all of those things today, hormones, and why this sensitive guide works. But I want you to understand is that you only need to take things to your level. So a lot of people ask me, should I be doing low histamine? Should I be doing low lectin? Should I be doing no carbs? And I always ask them, what's your goal? What is your goal? Because if you don't have allergies or asthma or joint pain or autoimmune, I have no need, zero need for you to worry about lectins at all. Zero need for you to worry about histamines if you don't have acid reflux, allergies, asthma, joint pain, just like I talked about. I have no need. Or skin rashes, if you don't have that, forget about it. Don't worry about that because there's a lot of high histamine foods that are just really good for you. I mean, like essentially, most of them are, right? They really are. They're great foods. The problem is we try to lump everybody into these new fads. And it's not that they're fads. They've always been around. So I shouldn't really say that. But what I can say is this, is that we don't need to make a mountain out of a molehill, right? That's the perfect analogy here. So we get excited about a topic like lectins. And again, yes, like they really exist. And yes, some people really do have issues with them. And yes, I'm actually one of those people. So why am I preaching against you worrying about right now? Is because it's a tiny fraction of the population. Very hypersensitive people like myself, my body, right? I was given this blessing and curse all at the same time of a hypersensitive immune system. And that all started with essentially gut function from when I was younger and taking antibiotics from essentially, basically birth all the way till when I was 14 and got put on the start of 3 years straight of amoxicillin. 3,000 capsules of amoxicillin later after 3 years, twice a day for mild acne. Now, should you ever prescribe antibiotics for acne? No, it's completely insane, completely insane. And I've said that before. Have I gotten over me blaming that dermatologist? Yes, I have. I've totally forgiven that. That was part of the healing process of why would someone do that once I found out about, the effect antibiotics can have on your gut. Yeah, because what he was doing is he was taught in medical school, one of the reasons why you can have acne is you have an overgrowth, you have bacteria, essentially, a lot of overgrowth of bacteria. And so antibiotics help with that. So he was just doing his job to help me get rid of acne. Now, did it hurt me in the long run? Absolutely. Was it a lot worse than having a little bit of acne as a teenager? Yes. What he should have talked about was fixing my gut. He should have talked about rebalancing my hormones, should have talked about all the processed food I was eating, all of those things. But obviously that's not taught in medical school. So it's not the doctor's fault. It's the system's fault. That's the real issue. But I guess that's neither here nor there. I really am over it. So all kidding aside, what I want to get to is all of these things that can happen, right? They can happen to us during our life. And many of those really they're out of our control because we didn't know about it in the first place, okay? Here's the deal. Every time you've had alcohol or you've taken ibuprofen, like Advil, right? NSAIDs, you've gotten extremely worked up, super stressed. You ate food at the same time. Maybe you did poor food combining. You ate a lot of sugary sweets, or if you're female, you've taken birth control. You've taken prednisone. You've taken any of these pharmaceuticals for the most part, or even, believe it or not, Splenda, sucralose, which actually has a chlorine molecule. That's how they make, believe it or not, I don't know if you know that. I've talked about it before, way back a couple hundred episodes ago on artificial sweeteners. And sucralose, again, a lot of us fell for it. A lot of us fell for it 10, 12, maybe 15 years ago when it first came out. We're like, oh, low calorie, doesn't affect blood sugar. Well, we all know better now. We thought that was it. That was the holy grail we were looking for, but we should have known just because it doesn't spike insulin, doesn't spike blood sugar. Here's what it does. It actually wipes out a lot of the good bacteria in your gut because it has that chlorine in it. Again, tap water. A lot of us don't know, we'll drink tap water, conserve water. Well, the chlorine, the fluoride, a lot of those things, not only do they hurt your thyroid, but they wipe out a lot of the good bacteria in our gut. So between alcohol and, pharmaceutical drugs, antibiotics, birth control, stress, anti-inflammatories, what happens is our gut wall begins to become compromised. And we also start to get a lot more of what's called pathogenic bacteria. So meaning the E. coli and maybe some of the Klebsiella bacteria, the Clostridium difficile, those things that are in our gut, they can start to proliferate. They can start to grow. And when they grow, it actually starts to displace. So it starts to displace the good gut bacteria. Well, now what does that mean? Well, here's what it means. We are no longer able to manufacture all of the good B vitamins in our gut. Now, it is important to get things like B vitamins from our diet and maybe from some nutritional supplements. But believe it or not, in the jejunum, the lower part of the small intestine, we actually manufacture a lot of our own vitamin B12 it's a big if our digestive system is working properly. And it is not if we're taking these antibiotics and these types of things. Now, here's the crazy thing. Some people take antibiotics, they drink alcohol, whatever it might be. They seem to be fine. They really do. They have just great humoral immunity. They developed a really healthy gut microbiome that was passed on from their mother. Good genetics. Okay, well, that's a small percent of the population. For all the rest of us, well, we may be affected by it. And certainly most people that I see in my practice have been, and believe it or not, from a very young age, people are like, well, I only took antibiotics, 4 times as a child or whatever it might have been. It can happen the very first time. Honestly, it can happen the first time. Here's what happens. You take the antibiotic, right? Antibiotic, so anti-life, antibacteria. Our bacteria is part of our life. In our microbiome, in our intestines, right? We have somewhere around 26 to 28 feet of intestinal tract, with only the last 5 feet being the large intestine, the first 21 to 23 feet being the small intestine. Well, here's the deal. In that, we have 100 trillion bacteria. 100 trillion with the T bacteria. There are only about, again, no one's counted, but there are only about 40 trillion cells of us. So we have more bacteria in our body that isn't us. That bacteria is foreign. It's foreign from us, that lives in our gut. We have more of that bacteria than there is of us. And what happens is this. When we take those antibiotics, which are essentially man-made for the most part, I can talk about the natural ones in a minute. What happens is this. It kills the bad bacteria. Yes, it absolutely does that. And there is a time and a place for antibiotics. I'll tell you that you know that I will always use whatever is best for you. Time and place. You have a staph infection. You have something that threatens your life. Okay. Well, then most likely you need that antibiotic. I agree with you. there. But these coughs and colds, and in my opinion, again, you have to go by what you feel is best for you. But when I get a sinus infection, I'm still doing natural-based protocols. That's me. But that might not be the right choice for you, right? When I get strep throat, I'm doing a natural-based protocol, but that's the choice for me. It might not be the choice for you. We all have to make our comfort level-based decision. Like, I'm very confident that I can get rid of a sinus infection, that I can get rid of strep throat, that I can get rid of these types of things, and I don't feel they're life-threatening for me. I'm not getting if I get a fever of 105, 106, little different story. We're not talking about that. What I do is when I get something, when my children get something right away, we're on it that very first day. We're on right away, and we're on it until they're completely better. And then we do one more day as well to make sure it's out of their system. Again, I do the same exact thing for me. And here's the truth. Sometimes it takes 7 days. Sometimes it takes 10 days to run its course and me to use my natural-based products. But I would rather that than go back to where I was before, when I didn't know what antibiotics did to my system, and for me to destroy my gut. But the thing is, it's not just antibiotics. It's also alcohol. It's also using ibuprofen. It's also, birth control. A lot of women were on birth control for 10 years, 15 years in my practice, sometimes more. And that also can disturb the body's ability to produce bile, which certainly affects the intestines, because the bile drops in the intestines to help break down fats. But also, a lot of people don't know this. Bile is an amazing detoxifier of the body. It helps to cleanse the intestinal tract, and it also helps to remove toxins from your blood, because that cholesterol and those toxins go into the bile. The bile is supposed to drop into your intestines, and that's supposed to then be eliminated in your stool. Well, a lot of times that doesn't happen when women use birth control, and that's or biliary stasis with a bunch of different things. It's not just that. So I don't want to turn this into an entire microbiome episode, but what I want to do is, here's the deal. You can do 2 things. You can either decide that it's time to stop guessing and just to test, right? That's the best case scenario. That's how I eventually started to put things together. And again, I didn't put it together. My first functional medicine doctor put it together. He said, I want to test your gut. And so we did a stool test. I don't believe the organic acids test was around back then. I always go for the organic acids test first when looking at the gut. And the reason is it's 75 biomarkers. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Yes, it tests for yeast and fungal overgrowth, for candida. It tests for gut permeability when looking at all of those things, but it also looks at C. diff, bacterial overgrowth, liver function, mitochondria, neurotransmitter waste markers. It looks at your B vitamins, looks at vitamin C, coenzyme Q10, biotin. I mean, literally, I could go on, and I usually do. It looks at glutathione, for liver, how well your liver's working. So, I love the test. It's so telling. I'm a huge fan of it. It's simple to do, right? It's a simple urine collection. One morning you wake up and you just fill up a cup, obviously, that just comes in the mail, of 30 mLs of urine. Simple, send it to the lab. I get the results. I read your results. And then my health coach, one of my amazing health coaches, takes you through those recommendations. So that's the organic acids test. I'm just giving you your options. You can choose to run it with us. You can choose to run it with a local practitioner, Or you might not want to run any of these, and then I'm just going to get right into the protocols right after this. So I'll be with you in one moment on that. So the next one is the stool test. The stool test is a little different than the organic acids test. The stool test is a 3-day collection. A lot of people have done 1-day collections before. Here's the deal with a 1-day stool collection. You miss things. That's just the bottom line. Sometimes you miss things. And that's because when you have a bowel movement, there's obviously certain bacteria that's coming out. There might be biofilms that, weren't exposing whatever we're looking to get at. So I like a 3-day collection. I really do. In the lab that we're using right now, again, no allegiance to any of these labs. Like legitimately, I think they're all great. I really do. But I'll be honest. In a month from now, 2 months from now, I find a lab with a lot, meaning like a lot of clinical data, at least a million labs run. Well, I shouldn't say a million. I would go with at least, let's say they've run somewhere around 250,000. I would start there as my entry point, meaning they've been around for a while and they can back up all the data that they're showing to me. Because it's really important. If I give you my word, this is something that I'm going to use myself and that I use myself. So anyway, no allegiance, but the company that I work with right now, I like that they don't just run it through a computer, that they actually have a human in the lab looking at the stool sample under a microscope. And that might seem kind of nasty, but that's what you want. You want someone literally looking there to say, hey, does this person have parasites? Do they have bacterial overgrowth? Do they have literally parasitic-based eggs growing in their intestine that's coming out of their stool? Do they have H. pylori? H. pylori is a huge issue. Blood is not the best place to test for H. pylori, and neither is a breath test. And that's because if it is not at a higher level, meaning that if it's not elevated, if the H. pylori bacteria is not at an elevated level, it may not show up, especially in a breath test. I'm better with the blood test, but stool is the number one way, in my opinion, to test for that. All right, and the last one we talk about for the gut is the food sensitivity test. I talked about that yesterday. I hope you tuned in. That was episode 809. Today's episode 810. So, I really do want you to tune into yesterday's episode if you didn't. And it's because I talk about how to test, whether you do a lab test or you can do it without a lab test for your food sensitivities, and why it matters. It's because of that rain barrel effect. It's that if you're eating foods that you're even only mildly sensitive to, it builds up inflammation over time. And people complain about inflammation all the time. And I'll tell you, getting to the root cause, and some of those are food sensitivities coming from healthy foods, is the way to do that. So super, super important. Those are my 3 gut lab tests. That's really, you can run a lot more, but those are the 3 that I believe that if you run, and you don't have to run them all, you could run like the organic acids test and the food test. You could run the stool test if you just want to check for parasites or H. pylori. Any of them are fine. And I just think that the more data you have, the more you have to work with, and the more the health practitioner can really guide you on your plan. But again, I'm going to get to all of those different types of plans right now. So anyway, those are the 3 labs. And if you listen to yesterday's show, we're doing a fun little pop-up for this week only for the food sensitivity test. I'll put the link in the show notes today as well on episode 810. It's just a nice little discount, just something only for podcast listeners. That's the fun thing. That's why I want to do things like that for the people who are really supporting this podcast. As much as I can give back, like anything that I can do, I'm going to do. And that's just something fun that my team and I thought about. So anyway, check that out. Nice little discount at episode 810 today. It's only for this week. So if you're listening to this in the future, I'm sorry, but this little pop-up is over. So here's the deal. This is what we do. Depending on what we find, we're going to begin to clean up the gut using different protocols. So the first thing we do is this. If we found out someone had a parasite, this is what we want to do. We'll talk about H. pylori in 1 second, but with the parasite, we want to go with the most pathogenic first. You have to eliminate parasites first. It's so important. And the reason is they are a little bit more virulent, meaning that they're not supposed to be there. So now we can get into semantics of which parasites we believe are actually can be healthy for the body and which ones aren't. We're not going to get into that today. We can talk about that on a future show. But in things like candida and things like bacteria, they're supposed to be in our gut. But we really have no place for parasites that can cause all sorts of emotional-based issues, that can cause skin issues, they can cause detoxification issues because they can get into your liver. So we really have to work on those first. So what we do is we do the parasitic cleanse. So it's called the parasite protocol. So it's not very inventive word-wise, but we'll link that up today on the show notes as well at episode 810. And so we do the parasite. That comes with the sensitive gut guide. But really what we're looking to do is also add in additional foods that help to kill parasites. So one of those is garlic, and another one is pumpkin seeds. Now we have other items on the list as well, But those two they've been known for thousands of years and just phenomenal at killing parasites. So then people ask, well, because our next part of the protocol is if you have Candida overgrowth or you have bacterial overgrowth like SIBO or IBS, IBD, any of these things with the gut, we do something called the Candida and Bacterial Overgrowth Protocol. Well, that's 12 weeks long and it walks you. I've gone over all this before. So let me see if I can pop up that episode really quick because I don't want to turn this into a 40-minute or it could be a 2-hour show. 796. So check out stephencabral.com/796. How to finally get rid of Candida and bacterial overgrowth. I literally go through the exact protocol. I really do. So that if you're on the protocol with a local health practitioner, you can be like, hey, I'm on the right track. I'm doing it correctly. Great. I'm going to get over this. And then here's how I rebuild my gut. So I'm not going to go through that because you can listen in at episode 796. But we have something called the Sensitive Gut Guide. And that's what I want to go through right now because it's really important. During this protocol, if we found out you had H. pylori, we're working on that right away. Along with the Candida overgrowth. And that's because if you have H. pylori, you're not producing stomach acid properly. You are not properly producing stomach acid. You might have too much. Okay. You might feel acid reflux during the day, or you might actually wake up bloated. You might feel bloated just drinking a glass of water because your stomach acid is so off. I've had H. pylori multiple times in my life. Again, real gut issues growing up, but nobody knew it. Like that just wasn't the thing. I grew up just in a normal household. We took antibiotics when we were sick. We drank Kool-Aid. We ate Fruity Pebbles. Like that's just what we did. It was what everybody did. So like there's no fault of my parents. It's no fault of my community, society. The real fault is with the health education system. At no point did a doctor ever tell me like, you know what, maybe you shouldn't eat all that sugar. Like that maybe is not a good idea. And, drink all that Coca-Cola and, all the Kool-Aid. So, but they didn't. And so as we say this in the health profession, there's no use crying over spilled coconut milk. So we just have to move on. Like we just move on. It's just the way it is. Well, this Candida guide, the Sensitive Gut Guide, here's what it does. Is we created a protocol. If you want to think about this, just write this down. If you're a health practitioner, write this down. If you're like, okay, do I need to follow this or not? It's a low FODMAP food guide. What does that mean? Well, FODMAP food stands for fructo, oligo, di, mono, and polysaccharides. You don't need to memorize that. But what it means is this. Those are all different types of sugars like fructose and lactose. And then we have the polyols, we have the xylitol, and we have all those different things, right? Sugar alcohols as well that can feed yeast, that can feed bacteria. They're essentially prebiotics. It doesn't even necessarily mean that they're bad, but they're bad if you have SIBO, and they're bad if you have Candida overgrowth because they don't always preferentially feed the good guys. They feed everybody. So in the beginning, we need to eliminate those, and that's what we do, but that's only part of the plan. Then what I did was I added in the anti-inflammatory component. So what does that mean? Well, we look at low inflammatory foods. Why? Because the gut's inflamed. Most likely your intestines are inflamed from eating foods that you're sensitive to and from essentially just having a war zone down there. You have Candida fighting for sugars in food. You have bacteria fighting other types of bacteria. Then you have immune cells actually coming in through the lumen, through the gut wall and creating damage because they're attacking certain proteins and pathogens and yeast and parasites. Like your immune cells can actually go into your intestines and cause this inflammation. And then people wonder why they have, they're like, oh no, I got a diagnosis. I have IBD or I have IBS. And I'm like, yes, you have irritable bowels, but you didn't need a doctor's diagnosis for that, did you? You knew that your bowels were irritable, right? And so we're kind of like laughing, joking around at that point. But here's the truth. Your bowels are irritable because they're inflamed. So what we do is we put you on a lower inflammatory diet plan. That means taking out a lot of things that are going to inflame the gut. And so some of those might even be healthy foods. Like we take out maybe some lower lectin foods in the beginning. So again, that's where lectins may matter in the beginning. So you don't need to know all of these things because we essentially we give you that, right? And you can give it to yourself right now. So in the beginning for the first 21 days, and you can do this on your own, you might want to eliminate lectins as well. So what we do is we put on this Sensitive Gut Guide that comes with the Candida and Bacterial Overgrowth Protocol and our gut-based protocols is that we eliminate the grains, right? So we're eliminating grains. We're not saying that grains are bad for you. What we're saying are grains are bad for some people. We need to see if you're one of those people. So we take it out. That's what we do. We also take out a lot of the higher lectin-based foods in general. Now they're already eliminated, right? So they're already eliminated and then we can test. We also go easy on the nightshades, just in case you have a nightshade-based issue. If you have, let's say you have inflamed skin or you have joint pain, well, we're going to take that out as well. And then we also do lower glycemic foods. That means if you're looking to lose weight, transform your body, I mean, we have people drop 5 to 10 pounds in a week without trying. There's 0 calorie counting on this sensitive gut guide. There's 0. And again, I'm telling you the foods that are on it. You can look those up. You're welcome to work with your health practitioner, however you feel is best for you. And of course, if you're on the Candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol, you're getting this information because this topic was done by request. So again, most of these topics always come in because you asked the question, I wanted to go deep on this particular topic. And the last part is we don't do no histamine, right? Because we don't want to totally limit people. But what we do is we go a little lower histamine, all right? So what we're trying to do, because again, take it from someone who had mastocytosis, which is just massive histamine-based production, hives, folliculitis, had all that. Here's the deal. Once you start to empty your rain barrel and lower that total load, histamines don't become as big a deal. Now, in the future, might I still have a histamine-based issue if I went out and ate like smoked food with fermented vegetables and washed it down with some red wine? Sure, like that might drive my histamine levels back up crazy. That might fill up my total rain barrel. I don't know if it would or not. Like, I'm not actually sure. I can have a glass of red wine with no issues because my histamine levels they're down, right? So I took that rain barrel, which was overflowing, causing my histamine issues, and I just brought it way down. But I also repaired my gut. That was a big part of it. So I followed this plan. Now, it doesn't have to be super limiting because you still have like 3 dozen vegetables to choose from. You don't have to go super low carb because you can still eat yams, sweet potatoes. You can eat a lot of root vegetables as well, which are great, especially cooked. That's going to lower the lectin levels as well. We try to do cooked in the beginning. And you get any protein essentially to choose from. Again, we're eliminating dairy in the beginning. And then if you don't test your food sensitivity test, you might want to eliminate eggs as well because they're a common food sensitivity. But that's up to you. It's also gluten-free because we're eliminating grains for the first 21 days. So it does so many different things. And again, that's what we're trying to help people with. But I'm just giving you the kind of the step-by-step of how we take people through this. And again, I know a lot of health practitioners are listening, or again, people who are maybe thinking about getting into the field. This is how you deal with variables. Like, this is how you help people get well, because after they're done with their first 21 to 28 day elimination, we start to add foods back in one at a time, or even one food group at a time. So even in the beginning, we eliminate nuts in the beginning. The reason we do that as well is because high lectin, high food sensitivity, we don't know if they tested them or not. But then we add them right back in. 3 weeks to 4 weeks isn't that long a period of time. So we start to add them back in. As we add them back in, here's what I ask people. I don't need you to get really, I don't need to micromanage this or get too crazy about it. Here's what I want you to do. When you ate that food that day and the next day, do you feel positive? Do you positive result? Meaning like, do you actually feel better including that food? Do you feel neutral? Meaning like nothing changed. You still feel the same. Or do you feel worse? All right. Now, if you feel worse, did you have that food in isolation, or was it potentially because you had a couple new foods? That's why we only ask for one new food reintroduction every 72 hours. And again, listen to yesterday's podcast on that because I really went in depth on how to add those foods. And I also talked about how to create your own rotation diet. That was a separate podcast that I listed on that show as well. So that's what we do. We start to add foods back in very carefully. Okay, we just do one at a time every 3 days, start to add them back in. And we see this is a bio-individual perspective now. Remember, we can give you the best plan in the world, right? You can get the best plan in the world, but you still have to understand there's a bio-individual component, which means that some foods that work for you aren't going to work for me. Some foods that work for me, they're not going to work for you. We're individuals. Our gut's a little different. And those foods can change. That's why I always tell people, if you're sensitive now, we'll try it again in 6 to 12 weeks. Because as we're repairing your gut, which is the very last part to this plan, you start to rebuild the gut wall. As you rebuild the gut wall, what happens? You change the microbiome. You actually eliminate a lot of the yeast overgrowth. And in its place, and in the place of the bad bacteria, we start to add back in the healthy strains of good bacteria, such as the lactobacilli and the bifidobacterium. We add those back in, right, to the small intestine and then the large intestines, very step by step. And this took years to develop. This was not, I read a book on it and then I put this together. No, this was years of trial and error on myself. Luckily, experimenting myself, listening, watching other practitioners, interning, developing my own protocol, using it in my practice, fine-tuning it. And then it's what we're left with today. But the nice thing is the last part of any gut rebuilding protocol is this, is you start to heal that very sensitive layer. Believe it or not, your gut wall, which keeps all the fermenting food and all that fermented in your bloodstream, is one cell. It's amazing. Like, it's a single cell essentially that wraps the entire intestines. And that is what we look to heal, to bring together, to make tighter so that proteins don't spill through, yeast doesn't spill through, bacteria. That is what we do by using the healthy gut support or the gut rebuilding protocol and the daily probiotic support. That's what we do. That is how we seal back up the gut wall. And again, you're basically going back to your everyday life, including your foods, and it's just working in the background. We do that over the course of about 12 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks, and you're left with a nice, new, healthy gut microbiome. At that point, you should really be able to add back in a lot of the foods that you enjoy. And even the foods that don't agree with your body, then you should still be able to have them once a week as a cheat meal. I mean, really, even for people with like high gluten sensitivities, I'm not going to say celiac, but because that's not a smart idea, obviously, to add gluten if you are celiac. But I've seen people be able to reintroduce foods that they never thought they'd be able to eat again. And it's because they're not the same person anymore. Like that's the whole point, is that you are not the same person after you've changed your microbiome. Why? Because the bacteria, that 100 trillion bacteria, the 100 trillion cells of bacteria in your gut are now different. And remember, you're different too. Your immune system is different. Every 90 to 120 days, all of the red blood cells in your body have turned over. That means you are a new person. So this is the statistics. Every 12 months, you are 97% regenerated. That means on this date last year, you essentially didn't exist. Like 97% of you is brand new. And that should give hope to a lot of people out there. It gave hope to me when I heard that. I was like, whoa. I was like, really? So if I just put in the work for the next 12 months, if I put in the work, I'm going to be a new person, like legitimately. And I find that in both mind and body, but we'll save the mind part for the Motivation and Mindset Mondays. But really my body became rejuvenated. Once I really did the work, once I knew, well, I was always doing the work, but I wasn't doing the right work. Once I knew the right work to do, and I could just put that into a plan, of course, there were highs and lows. There's always highs and lows. But I learned from my lows, kind of got back on that horse, and kept going forward. I mean, that's how I healed my body. That's how I help people in my practice today. And that's just what I want to share with you. So hopefully today's episode was helpful. If I left anything out, if I can answer any additional questions, please let me know. I'm always happy to help. What I will do is I'll put all those lab tests. I'll put the parasite protocol, the candida protocol, the gut rebuilding. I'll put all of those today. And obviously our little pop-up offer on the food sensitivity test at the show notes today. Just go to stevencabral.com/810. I really enjoyed being able to talk about the microbiome, really talk about the gut. It is the place to start. If you're confused about where to start, it's right here. I just know that this is going to get you back on the path to feeling well and leading your best life yet. Thank you so much for tuning into the Cabral Concept. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Take care. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stevencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.